Hi BookTube, it's Amy. I'm back again with a reading from A Garden Diary by Emily Lawless. Today I'm reading the entry for September the 8th, 1899. Our indefatigable old Cuddle has just come to tell me that the new water lily pond leaks and that I must send for the bricklayer in order to upbraid him. I am sometimes asked whether Cuddle is our gardener, and am always rather at a loss what to answer. Hardly, I suppose, seeing that he declines to take much notice of any of our flowers, with the exception of the roses, for which he has a passion. When he came to us 3 years ago, it was merely on job from the builders. Our grounds, as grounds had not yet then begun to exist. Cuddle stuck the first spade into them then and there, and from that minute their existence began. Since then, he has grown to be more and more intimately identified with them, and that to such an extent that I find it difficult now to disentangle the one from the other. Followed by his obedient satellite and shadow, he ranges at large over all that lies between their holly-guarded boundaries. His spade, pickaxe, billhook are masters of all that come within their reach. Walks and shrubberies, lawn and flower beds began within a short time of his appearance to emerge as if by magic out of their primal chaos. Order grew out of disorder, symmetry to be evolved, and light to break in upon the very duskiest of our entanglements. We have a habit of telling our friends that we ourselves made these grounds, but our part in the process has in reality been chiefly to sit still and point our wands. It is Cuddle alone, who has been the real creator. For sheer beaver-like, apparently instinctive industry, I have never in my life known his equal. For rooted self-opinionatedness, not, I must add, very often. How he contrives to get through the amount of work he achieves in the course of every day, still more how he induces his subordinates to do the same, remains a perennial marvel to me. Possibly, seeing that my gardening experiences have hitherto lain a long way to the west of Surrey, my standard as regular manual labour is not of the highest. That our Cuddle is a typical Surrey labourer, I decline, however, to believe, though theoretically that, and nothing loftier, is his status. Early in our acquaintance, he discovered my ingenious surprise over his prowess. Far from this suggesting to him that less activity would serve the turn, it seems to have only spurred him on to the fresh and ever fresh assaults upon my astonishment. That there have now and then been inconveniences in this excessive energy, I am free to confess, but that is hardly Cuddle's fault. If, for instance, I remark that such and such new work had better begun next week, my remark is usually received by him in apparently unheeding silence. Next day, however, when I return to the charge, I am told with a smile of pity that the work in question is already done. As I have just hinted, this sometimes places me in a position of some little embarrassment. Naturally, the work produced at such high pressure rather represents Cuddle's ideal of what it ought to be than mine. To show anything but delighted surprise would be to prove oneself utterly unworthy of such devoted service, and it is only therefore by degrees and in the most circuitous and disingenuous fashion that I am able little by little to reinstate my own ideas upon the more or less mutilated ruins of his. In these early days of September, we stand once more at a new parting of the ways. Within the next 6 weeks, all the essential part of what we hope to see accomplished by next summer must be at all events prepared, or it will be too late. 3 chief undertakings at present engage our energies. First is the new little water lily pond and its outer environment of bog. Secondly, there is the glade, which, beginning at the upper portion of the copse near the house, runs somewhat steeply downhill to its lower end. Thirdly, there is the long grass walk, which, passing first along the last named, is eventually to traverse the whole of the lower portion of the copse, a distance of some 600 yards, crossing as it does so the region of the tallest bracken, emerging for a while upon a gravel walk which skirts the fence of our nursery garden, thence through another stretch of copse, and between 2 tall heather banks into a fresh tract of birches and sweet chestnuts, till it finally attains the gate opening out upon the little common at the top. One somewhat serious problem underlies these, as indeed all similar little enterprises. How far, one asks oneself, may the natural conformation of any given piece of ground be legitimately modified? The most difficult, in my opinion, of the many small problems which confront the gardener. The lamentable declivities, the yet more terrible acclivities which abound in a certain type of garden we all know. Objects calculated to bring the blush of embarrassment to all but a hardened visitor's cheek. Like other ornaments, it is less their artificiality than their deplorable lack of art that so distresses us. These indeed are sad warnings, and remembering them, it is well to misdoubt our own judgment, and to ask ourselves whether it were not better to abstain altogether from any attempts at modification, which might lead to results so humiliating and so disastrous. There are, however, more encouraging omens. Anyone who has observed how casual, how purely accidental are many of the natural variations of surface, which nevertheless give us pleasure, has a right to ask himself whether the spade may not be allowed to produce in a few days what sun, wind, rain, and similar agents can achieve in a few years. I am inclined to think that it may only it might be a spade with eyes, and if possible with a brain behind it, and both are unusual with spades. In any case, wisdom exhorts us to proceed very cautiously and modestly with all such changes, to be sure that in the first place they are called for, and in the second that they will suit with the features of our ground, and the scene in which it is set. Else, if we neglect these precautions, we too may come to swell the ranks of those who have made the very word landscape gardening and landscape gardener sounds of terror in all discriminating and nature-loving ears. One of the least unsatisfactory ways of modifying one's ground and relieving its monotony is it seems to me, the glade. Glades may, of course, be of many forms and may suggest many ideas. They may pierce through the dusky heart of a wood, or they may lie nakedly and stonily open to the sky. They may be furnished with trees, with bushes, with heather, with grass, with alpine plants. On the whole, the easiest glade to create, and certainly one of the pleasantest when it is made, is the grassy one. Even a perfectly level bit of ground can be induced with care to pass by gradations into a grassy glade, though where there is some natural slope the matter is of course very much easier. In that case, all that is necessary is to add a sufficiency of earth in either side of the upper part of our incline, leaving the lower to merge by insensible degrees to the natural level. The essential point is not to miss the right moment for the sowing of the grass seed. This month of September is in this soil unquestionably the best month in the year for that purpose. August is apt to be too hot. October may be frosty, while spring sowings are, in my experience, excessively dulcive. If the summer that follows them is wet, all goes well. Seeing, however, that each summer since we came here has been more thirsty than its predecessor, it were hardly the part of prudence to rely upon that. It has been a satisfaction to us to find that a moderate upturning of the soil does not apparently disturb those inmates of it that we wish to retain. Bluebells and bracken both have their roots at a depth to which the spade and these operations need not penetrate, while to superimposed earth they appear to be quite indifferent. The spring that followed our first operations of this kind, bluebells flowered better than usual, as if glad to be freed from some of their troublesome neighbors, especially probably that pest of Copes's dog mercury. The introduced bulbs, which now share the ground with them, are mostly of the taller kind, daffodils predominating, and for these the fact of the soil being all newly upturned is an advantage. Our present plan is that the sides of the glade shall remain permanently uncut, or cut at most once or twice a year, the central or walking space being kept regularly mown. The bulbs, being at the sides, will thus not suffer. Moreover, the considerable difference of height between mown and unmown grass is bound to give height and emphasis to our little glade. As in the similar case of planting rock gardens, such considerations may seem to be to some poor devices, yet upon the successful carrying out of them depends the whole of that general effect, which is all that such critics probably heed. We are not, after all, nature's mandatories, and our little slopes are not Alps nor even alpine meadows. If we can attain to so much as a suggestion of the sort of thing we dream, we may rest content. And that is the end of that chapter, and so that's a wonderful chapter describing the gardens. Evidently, the author, Emily Lawless, was not really much of a gardener herself. She seems to understand the, I suppose, the architectural and the procedural features of a garden, but in terms of the actual gardening, it seems to be this cutler employee who does all the work, or rather Cuttle employee, spelt C-U-T-T-L-E, who manages to do most of this work quite efficiently. But it does sound like a lovely garden so far, and I'm sure more of it will be described in the coming chapters. But we'll leave it at that for today. The next entry is for September the 11th, 1899.